The world has never witnessed such a time. Through these unprecedented moments, we must understand that the most important consequence of this is that people are dying. And now, this is not just an opinion of mine or people who hold conspiracy theories that coronavirus doesn't even exist, which still shocks me till now. But we know that the US is currently leading the world in terms of deaths. There are currently already 120,000 deaths. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, but if you think about it, it actually is a lot of people. And now I was actually researching this the other day, and I found out that the UK is now leading in terms of being the country with the highest number of daily deaths per million people. Now, this is actually shocking because we all know that the USA has a large landmass. More people live there. That's why it would only be natural that more people have the virus there and are going to be dying from it. However, the UK is actually suffering a lot more than Italy or other countries at the moment. So, how do we combat this? That's the question. Well, everyone has their own way. Some people think that we should have a 2 meter distancing rule, and there are other people who think that we should not be visiting our grandparents or we should be going out and relaxing the laws. However, as we all know, it's painful, but this is a proven measure. Lockdown, if we know that from previously when we had our peak, the minute we entered lockdown, soon we could see the effects of this, and eventually we were having the daily death rate was going down, the number of new cases were decreasing, there were fewer patients admitted. And what's shocking is that the numbers that they give in the daily press briefing is not even including the care homes or the people at home, the elderly. And that's what's amazing, because while they may say that, 500 people died today, well, there's going to be a lot more than that, which they're not disclosing. So the issue is serious. And in my opinion, is the best way to deal with this is what's been proven, and which is staying at home and enduring this lockdown. And the reason for this is that this would prevent the second wave of this pandemic, which will result in us having to go in lockdown again. So I'm sure you've heard of the term, it's a marathon, not a sprint. If we start rushing things now and going out of the lockdown, then we could be endangering the lives of our elderly and vulnerable people. And the problem with this virus is that it's highly contagious. A study showed that every one person who has the virus can give it to 3 other people. And you can imagine when people go to schools and public gatherings, they come home. And especially people who live in extended family systems, they come to their grandparents or someone elderly babysits them, and they pass it on to them, and then they suffer the effects of this horrendous virus. Then they end up having to go to hospital, and this is a real strain on our NHS. And the reason I'm saying this is because the National Health Service is the beating heart of our country. And even Boris Johnson, who claimed to, people claim that he wants to privatise the NHS, he actually named his child after the worker who saved him in the NHS. So we must understand that if people are constantly burdening the already underfunded NHS, then this is a serious problem, because there won't be enough PPE, there will be pressure on the health workers, there will also be a lack of masks and beds, which people need, and this will result in the country being in even more debt. So when people talk about the economy, I'm confused, because surely this is a harmful thing as well. So all in all, what I want to really get across is that I know it's short-term pain. Some people feel as though they've not utilised this lockdown well. They feel as though they're under house arrest in their own home. But we know that this will not go on forever. And if we take in this lockdown for now, then I'm sure in the long term, we'll have the gain, and then we'll have all the freedom we want, and we will return to normality.
Wow.
Would be based on a global pandemic. Never did I imagine in my whole life that I'd get to spend so much time at home. Lonely, tired, bored, and just generally cut off from the rest of the world. We'd be forced to stay inside for weeks on end under strict government orders. At one point, isn't enough really enough? Our team will defend as to why we believe lockdown should be eased. Firstly, we've already flattened the curve, so isn't it time to finally come out? Firstly, looking at the religious aspect of things, I'm sure many of you can agree with me when I say that this lockdown has heavily affected our past traditions. I mean, no places of worship open, no usual festivals. What should we expect next? Moving on to the mental health. This lockdown has had a huge impact on our well-being and mental health. It was reported that almost half of the population suffered high levels of anxiety, and that was only in March and April. So that was just the beginning of lockdown. Many suffered depression as well. So shouldn't lockdown be eased before these figures escalate further? Another main factor is education. So with schools being shut, children have had to adapt to a new way of life. This dramatic change has been difficult for many to cope with. Children who don't have access to technology, they've had a massive disadvantage. Another reason why we strongly believe lockdown should be eased is because our economy will crumble. Businesses have been forced to close down. This resulted in the UK unemployment to soar to almost 1.3 million. We think lockdown should be relaxed before our economy drops further. In addition to this, people have had to adjust regarding fitness. I mean, no gyms, no swimming pools, no leisure centres, no clubs open. These are just some of the reasons why we believe lockdown should be eased. Lockdown has started being relaxed. For example, from 15th of June, unnecessary shops opened. I'm not saying that everything is going to be back to normal, but I'm still saying that we still have to be cautious. And this is just a start. So next, I'll hand over to Abdullah, who will speak after Team A.
Easing the lockdown affects not just us, but also the NHS. The population of the UK is just over 66 million people, and there are only 140,000 NHS hospital beds and 5,000 ventilators. So far, there have been just over 42,000 deaths in the UK due to coronavirus, and if lockdown is eased, the numbers will double and triple, and who knows how many people will end up dying. Imagine if 500,000 or even 250,000 of the UK's population requires hospital treatment due to the coronavirus. We know that the NHS does not have enough beds nor ventilators to treat all of these corona patients. It is very important that we must protect the NHS, and by doing so, we will be saving valuable lives. We all know how valuable the NHS is for the people of the UK. Yet it upsets me to know that there are people who would like to see complete lifting of the lockdown. God forbid that happens and we see a lot more transmissions and people needing hospital treatment, then unfortunately the NHS will struggle to cope with the demand and can run into big problems. The other very important point is there are limited supplies of PPE for all NHS staffs, including doctors, surgeons, and nurses to treat corona patients. It is very important that our key NHS workers are given PPE to treat corona patients. They are risking their own lives to save other people's. So we must admit, the NHS workers are our heroes. So we must continue in lockdown until a vaccine is developed, which is hopefully made by next year, to protect the NHS and save valuable lives. Thank you very much.
Are dying every single day. If you know that there's no vaccine to save these innocent people, then why would you even think for a second to defend your point? Lifting the lockdown would only increase the number of people getting the coronavirus. This means the transmission of the virus from human to humans will increase, and the R number value will increase too. The UK already has the highest death rate per million people in any country in the world. Now tell me, how do you still think we are ready to ease lockdown? Over 42,000 people have lost their lives due to coronavirus, and you're practically encouraging more to give up their lives too. Lifting the lockdown now could mean we've reached 1 million people dead in the UK. Is this really what you're fighting for? All lives matter, and the government needs to continue with the lockdown until the virus is under control and the treatment has been developed. Do you not think about the worries that go through the 184 people who are looking at their mums, daughters, and uncles for the last time? And the thing is, that's just each hour. Yes, 184 people die each hour. And do you think it's acceptable to let these numbers grow? I know and have proof that if we ease the lockdown rules now, we are just causing a second peak to occur. And the thing is, even you know this, that by easing lockdown at this stage, yes, we may be able to go meet friends and family, but we'll also lose hundreds of more lives. And answer my question now, which one would you rather prefer? Will we only say no to lockdown when you've lost a loved one? But not only this, do you think it's appropriate to ease lockdown when there's no cure, no remedy, no vaccine? I'm telling you that you are defending the wrong side and are putting the whole UK in great danger. So I'm asking you this one last time. Are you willing to save hundreds of innocent lives out there by waiting a few more weeks to ease lockdown rules?
As we know, it has largely been put into a standstill, with millions of us being kept indoors as government tries to reduce the spread of the Covid-19 pandemic. And it is only under this lockdown that we are in that the world is essentially in a healing stage and having time to breathe, as prior to lockdown, because of the huge number of cars in the streets and factories being open, as well as flights going out every day, this resulted in huge amounts of carbon dioxide being emitted into the air, giving a huge increase to global warming. Also, prior to the lockdown, many factories were still operating, and it would become virtually impossible to close all polluting factories overnight. And for example, if you take China, which is the epicenter of world's goods manufacturing, it was bound to be home to numerous factories, which would create colossal amounts of pollutants being transmitted into the atmosphere. However, now that we are in lockdown, with all the non-essential businesses being closed, this resulted in the closure of factories and a reduction in the modes of transport like aeroplanes and cars, as they are rarely used, and this resulted in half of the world's carbon dioxide emissions being dramatically reduced. It's also been proven through research that the visibly brighter and clearer skies are leading towards a reduction of thousands of deaths amongst those who are asthmatic, as we now have cleaner air to breathe in. This just shows that the natural world has continued to rumble on, and in some cases even shown some signs of benefiting from our absence. And coming out of lockdown, I genuinely believe that all humans have now started to appreciate the nature around them more, as people have started to go on walks more daily, and many have been introduced to hobbies such as gardening, meaning more trees and flowers and vegetables are being planted. The increase in the number of trees planted will allow us to breathe in cleaner air, as we all know that trees inhale carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen. So all in all, this lockdown has not only positively impacted the environment, as it's saving millions of human lives, but it's also preserving the natural beauty of this earth, which has long been neglected. Thank you.
Children can still get a school education through distance learning due to the technology we have. For example, every day me and my siblings get assignments online, and occasionally my teachers call my parents to ask what progress I am making. Some universities like Cambridge now want virtual lectures even after the COVID-19 because it's not necessary to be face-to-face. Moreover, businessmen are also thinking of virtual meetings on Skype and Zoom because they don't think it's necessary to be face-to-face. Also, it's clearly evident that kids cannot go back to school. Firstly, due to the confined classroom, it is simply impossible for kids to obey the 2-meter rule. How could you expect kids who can't stop the spread of lies to not spread the COVID-19? We should not take the risk of sending kids back to school unless the government want another peak to occur. Furthermore, it was shown that a few schools were open and closed again due to some pupils testing positive to the coronavirus. We need to take in consideration that some pupils will have somebody vulnerable that stay with them. Would you really want to put you and one of your vulnerable family member in danger? Although life of education is not how it used to be, children are still getting an education. Overall, I think kids should not be going back to school. It is a huge risk which should not be took. One day when coronavirus will end, things will start being normal. But for the time being, we should not risk another peak and should be grateful for what online resources we have.
In the middle of a pandemic, but I have been seeing nothing but negativity. Although some of us may dread the long hours of boredom in quarantine, so much so that we don't even realize the amazing opportunity we have right in front of us. Sure, social distancing and not being able to leave the house might be discouraging, but I believe there are many positives to come out of this. Now is the time to do all those things you have been thought about doing for years. Firstly, you could start with practicing new hobbies. Not only will hobbies give you a way to take your mind off stresses of everyday life, which would especially be beneficial in quarantine, but it'll also give you a lifelong new hobby. Recently, I myself have been getting more active as I have practiced new hobbies such as cooking, which I thought I would have never done before lockdown measures were announced. Also, I have made a prayer room for me and the rest of my family, which leads me on to my next point on religion. Nearly all religions have to figure out how to practice their faith without being physically together to celebrate, whether it's Easter or Ramadan. Furthermore, quarantine gives you the perfect opportunity for families to share everyday activities together. Families form strong emotional ties. Studies have found that families who enjoy group activities together share a stronger bond as well as an ability to adapt well to situations as a family and helps form long-lasting connections. Overall, I think we should make the most of our time in quarantine, whether that be by practicing new hobbies such as baking and sports, or reconnecting with your families and becoming more religious.
Imagine never seeing your family again. During lockdown, elderly and vulnerable have been given certain privileges. If lockdown ends, these privileges are more likely to be taken off them. For example, the elderly have been given designated times in which they can buy what they need. If lockdown eases, this feature might not be there anymore. As well as this, care homes have a large amount of deaths because elderly are more at risk of COVID-19. Up to the 1st of March, there were 8,312 people who have died, and that figure has obviously grown since then. Elderly lives are just as important as young lives. Lockdown easing will also mean that people will just want to see their family more, and that means that there's more chance of infection. Lockdown easing will also be bad news for those who are vulnerable. People have now realized that they can do lots of things from home, such as hospital and GP appointments, you can call them, and medicine collections, you can get them delivered to your door, and so much more. If lockdown eases, people will have to go and get things, which means that they can get COVID-19 easily. As well as this, people have started to help their neighbours. For example, if they're shielding someone or if they are self-isolating. Lockdown easing will just mean that more people will have to go back to work, and that might mean that they will be too busy to help. In lots of holy books, it says to help neighbours and anyone else who needs it. So this means that we should continue to help them. Why sacrifice more lives when we could have saved them? Why grieve over people who could have been here?
Have to answer right now, and that is if we should ease the lockdown or not. I am going to defend the reason why lockdown should be eased, looking at the religious point of view. One of the important events that came up in the lockdown is Easter. Easter is a celebration when Jesus rose up from the cave. In the lockdown, the Pope were preaching in a big empty square with no one inside. Rome is a very good example how the lockdown affected globally, not just in England. Normally, we would say gatherings when they are parties. Another series of events was in Ramadan, when Muslims have to fast. One of the key events that came up in Ramadan was Tarawih, which is a congregational prayer. So it means that it is read in a group, so usually read in a mosque. This develops brotherhood and equality within the Muslim community, with giving us a chance to connect with God. Personally, I really missed it. I am sure you can agree with me when I say that usually we would have iftar gatherings where everyone would come together and eat and thank God. But due to this pandemic, it wasn't possible. In the morning, Muslims usually go to the mosque. It is usually very crowded. Children and adults alike get a real feel of Eid, but in this lockdown, it wasn't possible. Shouldn't the lockdown be eased before any traditions are lost for the next generations to come? Next speaker will be Safa, who will be speaking about mental health. How mental health is affected by the lockdown.
Getting enough exercise as we should be. I don't think we are, as the government have limited the maximum of an hour to go outside. I definitely think we should get more than an hour, as we are spending most of our time trapped inside our houses than getting fresh air and going on walks. We are also spending most of our time on our electronics, communicating with our friends when we forget about outdoor life and getting exercise. Why should we exercise and keep fit in lockdown? I think we should keep fit in lockdown because, as I said before, we are spending so much time on our electronics, and this can affect us in many ways. A study from science shows that spending too much time on your devices can lead to impaired brain structure and function, insomnia caused by light at night flashing into your eyes, and also mood swings. I definitely think Boris should let us have more time outside because we are spending most of our days inside, and this is not healthy for our body. The next speaker will be Hashim.
Protesting in London, and the infection rate has gone higher. So that if we left lockdown, then no deaths would have been happening. It would have been exactly the same and all good. A confusion. Boris Johnson has been in Boris Johnson's speeches. He has been saying a lot. Hold the lockdown, but also protect yourselves and stay at home, which makes no sense. He's also been saying you can go to a shock graph going around showing that Sweden and England have the exact same amount, not the exact same, have nearly the same amount of deaths as, even though Sweden did not go into lockdown. The Sweden government trusted their people to go in crowds up to 50 people, but it's been exactly the same. The last reason is my personal reason. Most of my family members live 200 miles away from here. That's also where Dominic Cummings' mother lives, 200 miles away. And he went to visit his mother. That is very hypocritical and unfair because he's saying not to go out when he is doing it himself. Yeah, that's it.
Student. I will be talking about education, and I have a direct experience of how detrimental lockdown has been for me and all other students. I missed our residential trip, the highlight of Year 6, and the Leavers Party. I didn't even get to say goodbye to my friends. Everything was cut short. My education has suffered as I have had completely reduced interaction with my teachers, students and school. My vital SATs exams, preparations for secondary school, support and interaction with my peers stopped as we have been left to our own devices. Firstly, school is often the safest place for children in lockdown who come from difficult homes. For these kids, they may suffer higher levels of abuse, emotional, physical, mental, and even neglect. Working parents are more likely to miss work in lockdown to take care of their children incurring wage loss and less productivity. For young people in lockdown, there is unequal access to teaching resources, good internet, or even a device. Reading books, teachers, and mentors, therefore creating more disadvantage and a less bright future. The greatest effects were for those who didn't get to do their vital GCSEs and A-level exams, university exams, even SATs. If lockdown is not lifted, further life exams will be missed, impacting more students. Please, let's not let the problems increase, creating a scarred generation. Are you aware that 2.3 million children in the UK have done almost no schoolwork since the beginning of lockdown? And also, BBC Education said a third of pupils are not engaging with set work. This is a horrifying statistic. We need to lift lockdown now. Thank you.
The economy has been growing for many years, and due to coronavirus, it's fallen into recession. This has already had a huge impact, and if we don't do anything about it now, things will only just get worse. If we don't do anything, 20 years from now, we will still be living the consequences of our mistakes. We have the chance to fix this by starting to ease lockdown to prevent an economic crisis. Already, as the outbreak has spread around the world and into the UK, public health measures to slow its progress have meant fewer people working and businesses in some sectors shutting down entirely. And yet you say we shouldn't ease lockdown. The UK economy is in recession, with indications from the Bank of England that the decline in gross domestic product in 2020 will be 13 to 14%, the largest since the post-war era. If this does happen, it will cause a catastrophe, as compared to the last fall in gross domestic product before this was only 4.2% in 2009. And yet you say we shouldn't ease lockdown. The public finances will also be significantly affected by the economic shock of the coronavirus outbreak. As more people are unemployed, they seek help from the government for universal credit and other benefit schemes. The government has announced measures to support businesses, workers and household incomes that may cost over £130 billion this year. By starting to open some shops and businesses, unemployment will decrease, taking pressure off the government as they will have to support less people and businesses. The longer this lockdown period continues, government spending will increase and so will government debt. This will affect our future as there will be less spending on public services and also an increase in unemployment. All of this will affect you in the future, yet you say we shouldn't ease lockdown. And when we say ease, we don't mean we should suddenly go back to life before lockdown with no social distancing or safety measures, but that we should take steps to gain some norm back into our lives. I understand that you say lives are more important than this, but what lives of victims of domestic abuse living? What lives of those who are dying yet can't see their families living? Is this a life you want to save? Whether the government officially eases lockdown or not, people will eventually start breaking lockdown rules, resulting in chaos and more cases, as there won't be any safety measures in place. People are desperate to get out, they're desperate to go to work, they're desperate for change.
Is, should lockdown continue or not? Well, I will be speaking on the side of lockdown should not continue, as I have few points to say. Firstly, lockdown was an act of protection to people not to spread infection among each other. Well, it was good in the beginning of the pandemic situation, but since this lockdown has extended by the government, it has not much of benefit. How lockdown is affecting physical health. It has prevented us from regular outdoor activities, visit to the gym and walking and jogging track. Not only general worries, but it also is affecting our physical, mental and emotional health, even leading to tension, stress and anxiety. The COVID-19 pandemic is taking a toll on overall health and well-being. And with the same news going around all the time, we cannot deny the fact that we are all drained and jittery. To remain physical health, who recommended 180 minutes a week of outdoor exercises for children above 5 years of an adolescence, while 15 minutes for exercise a week is best for adults. Remember, physical activities are necessary for maintaining good health to achieve a balance in our physical health, well as it protects ourselves from the infection. We need it to follow like the discipline strictly which has been laid down by the government. Thank you.
Check of that time, that would be useful. You don't want to be penalised for going over time because that gives you an advantage. So you have up to 3 minutes and we will allow for 30 seconds after that. To this because you've both put forward great arguments, both teams. So we'll do it, guys, and they're listening. Thank you.
Everyone's already familiar with the protocol of 2 meters social distance, frequent hand washing, and covering your faces. It's already mandatory to cover faces on public transport. A simple cloth mask cuts down 95% of breathing, so it's highly protective around others. So the elderly, I'm sure you can agree with me, they're an important part of society. So in elderly care homes, communicating via device is usually seemed unideal. They need to be back in touch with their loved ones to support their well-being and their mental health as well. I'm sure you can agree with me. It's going to feel quite isolated in those care homes because no frequent visits from your family. So going back to life after COVID-19, we all have to accept that life won't be the same. Well, not for a long time at least. This gives us more of a reason to lift lockdown earlier, so we can all adjust to a normal life quickly. Just recently, Lord Sugar, who's 73, flew from Florida, which is 4,300 miles, and he claimed to be just fine. So, economy. Our economy has dropped so much with this lockdown. UK debt is larger than the size of the whole economy. So it was reported that 21 days into lockdown and more than 50 billion pounds was already out of the pocket. In short, there's been a bigger turndown since 1930. 1/5 of small businesses were pushed into bankruptcy. So it shows that figures will rise to 1/3 in July. A professor at Bristol University calculated that if our GDP falls to 6.4% as a result of lockdown, more years of our life will be lost than saved. For all we know, we aren't even sure if lockdown is working. But the fact is that direct evidence for the effectiveness of lockdown in this situation is still minimal. The approach is based mostly on modelling. Many countries with very different approaches seem to have similar curves. The curves on ships affected by this virus seem more similar to population curves as well. For example, take Sweden, for example. Sweden's model of voluntary social distancing seems equally affected, but with much lower costs. Vaccines could take years to develop. Are we actually expected to stay into lockdown all this time? Plus, not everyone who catches this infection will die. It's only those who are vulnerable that may succumb. From global experience, this disease kills off around 7 to 10 days. And there's a plus side to this as well. It could generate active immunity that could last a lifetime. UK has had highest death rate despite lockdown, which could suggest that lockdown isn't the most effective way to approach this.
Of the team. However, on the point of failing businesses, you actually have to consider that businesses like Zoom and Amazon and Skype are actually thriving, and that we were already moving towards a technological front. It's just now that we've consolidated this, and now e-learning is the way forward. As one of my speakers said, Cambridge University, one of the top universities, is now decided that even after lockdown, they will continue with these courses. Now, when it comes to the issue of the economy, surely if we come out of lockdown, there will be an increase in cases. That means more admissions to hospitals. And eventually, that will not only put a strain on the NHS, but also mean that more PPE, more beds, more ventilators, and more equipment are needed. And who's going to pay for that? Well, the answer is the government. However, where will they get this money from? Surely this will be a burden on them too. And maybe this means that the government might need to take a loan, which will be paid back with interest. Isn't that plunging us into even more debt? As for the issue of schools, well, I think this is better for our pupils because parents, through homeschooling, are actually more aware of what their children do at school and the curriculum. And as for when we go back to school, then we have pickups, we have drop-offs where children are collected, parents talk on the playground. And surely that isn't that a cause for transmission as well, giving it to other people in that way? And on the issue of poor pupils and then struggling, well, actually, I read an article the other day which said that governments are not only giving this poor pupils food vouchers so that because they're missing their free school meal, they can compensate for that, but also some computers are being handed out to them as well so they can complete their tasks. As for children getting unhealthier, in my opinion, it's actually the totally opposite. I mean, I feel like I'm getting healthier along with people that I live with because I know about this Joe Wicks thing and about how he does this 9 o'clock exercise workout where all the family gets involved. And also just about the unlimited walks. When people are making fun of it, but they're going on walks more, aren't they? They're appreciating. Walking may not be fun, but it's keeping us out of the house. And as for what's it called, mental health, well, firstly, we need to adopt a positive mindset. We need to think to ourselves that we will get out of this. We will, and we need to stay strong. And I know it's hard, but we can do this together. And as for people dying and stuff, I think that the key thing is that when people have funerals, I'm sure you've heard that only a few people are allowed to attend, and the person who's doing the burial must wear full protection. So surely this is a mental health problem too, that people are having to suffer. They can't even see their loved ones for the last time, whereby before they used to have funerals. So I hope that you've learned that lockdown is not a choice, but a necessity, so we can survive and continue our businesses once we are well and fit.
The first debate, and oh, hold on a minute, I'm muted by the look of this. No.
You're okay now.
Am I on now? Yeah, I'm okay. I can put my papers away now because I know exactly what I'm going to say. First of all, I think it was a great exercise that we carried out today. And this is what I love about this, is because it's an opportunity for all of us to learn. You know, myself, Khalid, and Dr. Nasa included, because I've learned lots of things today that I didn't know before. And I find that every time we have this. But what I would like to say about the debate is that the whole point of a debate is to destroy your opponent's arguments. Now, both sides put up great arguments. Both sides did very, very well. And all three of us agreed that you put forward equally good arguments. And because Team A didn't destroy Team B's argument and Team B didn't destroy Team A's arguments, we were unable to come up with an outright winner. So that you know, for the next time that we do a debate, which is going to be, I think, as Nasa said, the last one of the meetings, you need to know that when you're doing a debate, your job is not to put forward a good argument. It's to put forward an argument and then listen to your opponent's argument and then go away and come back and destroy their argument. That's the point of the debate. That didn't happen today. So I'm pleased to say in one hand that there wasn't a winner, because you've both done so well. We have, all three of us, agreed that this debate has ended in a draw, because it teaches you to be more confident, to stand up for yourself, to make your point and to hold on to that point and be able to bat off any competition. And that comes in handy in any walk of life. So I say well done, guys. It was a really exciting morning to go through this process with you. I enjoyed it thoroughly. You've obviously all done your homework, and congratulations to both teams. It's a draw.
Been involved, so I didn't really know the caliber of each speaker. Very impressed by pretty much everybody who came on today. Couple of people, they stood out, and one in particular made my scoring. I scored everybody individually, and the scores are 60 points each to both teams. And the team that did get 60 points was because of one particular member. She was brilliant throughout the time that she spoke for. Perhaps I'll mention the name in the next session. But well done, thoroughly enjoyed the two topics, and take on board what Rona said about destroying the other person's argument. Do not be shy, do not hold back. You are here to win the argument, destroy the other person. This is a debate. You don't have to be nice. So keep that on board. Think about this next time that we do the same thing. Thank you.